Welcome back to the Call Up, your go-to podcast on the future stars of Major League Baseball. As always, I'm your host, Aram Layton. He's your host, Jack McMullen, and we've got a lot of World Baseball Classic stuff to recap, but this time on a prospect lens. We've been talking about the World Baseball Classic a ton on the Just Baseball show. It's one of the best weeks of our baseball lives, I think we could say pretty easily. It was really awesome, but also from a prospect lens, Jack, it was just endless, all of the talent that we got to see, whether it was from Samurai Japan or even some of the younger players on Team Canada, on Team Israel, just across the board.
Yeah, well, you can scrap the word baseball. I think that was one of the best weeks of my life, flat out. That was just awesome. And like baseball happened to be a really big part of that. Yeah, it was really cool. And we did a lot of really unique content. Like we vlogged for the first time in our life. I never thought I would be a vlogger, but here we are as vloggers. And it's pretty cool, man. But yeah, there was a lot of intrigue. And of course, we got a literal front row seat to Roki Sasaki and Monotaka Morikami. But, we also watched a bunch of other guys in pool play that stood out and a lot of real prospects that are affiliated. Like Sasaki, yes, is a prospect. But, you're not necessarily going to look at him and say, oh, well, he's a AAA guy right now. No, he's probably an $100 million major league starter right now, and he's going to be a $200 million starter when he gets posted in 5 years. With a bunch of other guys, we're watching a Sal Frelick and Eduar Julian, even a guy like a Denzel Clark or an Owen Casey, who are farther away. It was a really good tournament for that.
How about even a Carlos Hernandez?
Yeah, man.
And that was one where, like, let's give ourselves a call up, pat on the back here, because we were talking about all of the prospects. We hit on Nicaragua, and we said, look out for Carlos Rodriguez. And Carlos Rodriguez was spectacular. This guy absolutely shoved for Nicaragua. And what's amazing is that he actually might be a factor for the Brewers in their system in terms of one of their more intriguing pitching prospects. Rodriguez was nasty with the changeup, with the fastball kind of jumping out of his hand. Like there was just a lot of guys that maybe you wouldn't really have on your radar as much that impressed. And then what I really loved was being able to see up close and personal some of the other prospects on Samurai Japan, or players, I should say, because, some of them are older, but may get posted and may come over later that maybe don't get as much of the fanfare because of the big names, like you mentioned, like Murakami, Sasaki, and even a Yoshida, who is going to technically be a prospect ranked in our top 100. Man, it was fun because we get to see these guys take batting practice too. Where do you want to start? Do we start with Sasaki? Because I know we're going to kind of go team by team, some of the prospects and like how they fared overall, but I kind of want to start with who we saw in person. Because Sasaki, this was probably for both of us, maybe the most excited we've been in a while to see somebody pitch or play baseball that we hadn't seen yet.
Yeah, I think so. Like I had never seen Ohtani live, so I was just really excited to see Shohei Ohtani play baseball live. But I can tell you, with full confidence that I was more excited to watch Roki Sasaki pitch than I was to watch Mike Trout or Mookie Betts hit in person, which is really weird. But that's because of the unknown and because we've heard so many positive things about Roki Sasaki. And we knew that the first pitch of the game could be 99, could be 100. Guess what? First pitch of the game was 101. And the first hitter he saw, he struck out on an 102-mile-an-hour fastball that took off like an absolute rocket ship to throw it right past the hottest hitter in the world in Randy Arozarena. Yeah, Sasaki, Murakami, Yamamoto, I'd love to start with here because those are the guys that, are prospects but not. And you mentioned Yoshida. Like, you're going to have a guy in your top 100 list, I guess, because Yoshida is going to be a top 100 prospect that set the WBC record for RBIs in a tournament, but he's 30, is he a prospect? So yeah, I think that's a good plan. Sasaki, Murakami, Yamamoto, and then the rest we can go pool by pool.
So just starting with Sasaki, because he really is a prospect. He's 21, and would probably be, not even probably, would undoubtedly be the number one pitching prospect in baseball if he was in affiliated ball right now. It's that simple. First pitch of the game, to your point, to Randy Arozarena was 101. He punches him out on 102. but it's not just 101, 102. It's got life. There was 20 inches of induced vertical break on the fastball. It's probably close to an 80 grade. It probably is almost an 80 grade fastball. And that's what makes it amazing that, Luis Arias was able to actually take him deep. But it also just shows you, like, this is a guy that's 21 years old. He literally is a prospect. He's pitched in only the NPB, has pitched really well there, but is still learning how to pitch. What was amazing is he had certain at bats. There was one specific at bat with Alan Trejo where he threw 4 pitches to Trejo. All of them were 100 miles an hour. It was first pitch fastball, ball at 101. Second pitch was a strike at 100.4. Third pitch was a ball at 101, and fourth pitch was a ground out at 101. Like, you just don't see that, and the fact that he also has this freak splitter. The one thing that stood out to me that I think is missing, and this is going to be the one thing that kind of takes Sasaki to where he needs to be from that $100 million guy to that $250 million guy, is the slider. And we didn't really see much of it. When we previewed these guys, we talked about Yamamoto as having the more complete arsenal. And I think we saw that exactly here, right? Fastball, splitter, both of those are plus pitches. He might have 270 grade pitches, almost an 80 grade with the fastball now. But to be a successful major league pitcher in terms of the ceiling that we're casting on Sasaki, that slider is the one thing to monitor moving forward. And he didn't really throw it much in the game. And that was pretty much the only nitpick I could have on what is one of the most talented young arms I've ever seen in person.
Yeah, so I'm going to counter your negative with another positive for Roki Sasaki, because, like, this guy, listen, I think we both came away with glowing reviews of him. Yeah. And I said on the Just Baseball show, I think it was the Just Baseball show, could have been the call-up, but I said at the end of last year, I think that Elly De La Cruz is the most talented non-major leaguer on planet Earth right now.
Yeah.
And I may honestly want to take that back after watching Sasaki in person. But I think Elly De La Cruz and Roki Sasaki are 1-2 in that regard. And that tells you the type of alien that Roki Sasaki is, because we talk about Elly De La Cruz like he is the second coming. And Sasaki may very well be that. I think Sasaki is the Elly De La Cruz of pitching. Yeah. The thing is, Cruz does the bad thing at the plate a lot. He strikes out a lot.
The bad thing. Yeah.
Right. The bad thing in pitching is walking guys. Sasaki doesn't do that.
No.
In the WBC, 7 2/3 innings, 11 punch outs, 2 walks. That's his jam. He's never walked guys at any level. I take Sasaki, and we were talking about this, just like sitting there watching him throw. Like, is he the number 1 prospect in baseball right now if you included him in the top 100? And I think you immediately said yes, and I'm right there with you. I think immediate yes from me.
Yeah, I mean 100%, and that's the scariest part, is he's this dominant right now. And again, like that, the one thing that he could get better with it is the slider, right? Is the breaking ball, which he only throws about 6% of the time, because, and this was in 2022 in the NPB, because he just doesn't quite have the feel for it yet. You're telling me if this guy came stateside, someone couldn't teach him how to spin a slider? Like, the difference is, in the NPB, in Japan, they teach a splitter, I think, probably before they teach a breaking ball, right? Like, that's what these guys learn. So with that arm speed, with that arm talent, and also he pounds the strike zone, to your point, 73% strike rate in 2022 on the fastball, 70% strike rate on his splitter.
That doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense. If you teach this guy how to spin a breaking ball, which he will learn when he comes over, he might be the best pitcher in baseball. It's just that simple. Yes. That's the one thing missing. That's it. Because I think that you had a U.S. team that still he handled, but they cheated for the fastball, dared him to locate the splitter. He did for the most part, but finally Arias caught one, right? And that was the difference. So, I mean, it was everything we could have hoped for, and I think even a little bit more in terms of the talent, especially when you average 101 miles an hour with your fastball. I can't wait for Sasaki to come over, but it's crazy that this kid's far from a finished product. He's only 21 years old.
Yeah, I mean, we could be talking about, at the time, like with how the market is changing, we could be talking about a $300 million pitcher when he comes over, which is absolutely insane. And I'm with you. Jeff Passan, in his preview of Mexico, Japan on ESPN, called Roki Sasaki, at worst, a Jacob deGrom starter kit. And I got texted that quote, and they said, no way this is real. Like, that's worst case scenario. And I said, worst case scenario, he is a triple digits fastball, a good splitter, and he throws strikes.
Yep.
Worst case scenario.
He's a
That's a
two-pitch guy.
3.5 ERA.
It's a two-pitch dominant guy with a freak fastball and good command. Like, that's going to play.
Yeah. Worst case. Best case is he is the best pitcher in baseball. I'm with you.
We'll stay on the pitching trend because I'm excited to talk about Murakami, because just being able to marvel. You know how I am about hitting in terms of just how much I love to just watch the biomechanics of these guys. He was a biomechanics masterclass. So I'm going to get into
his body. Yeah, we'll get to
he knows his body. But how about Yoshinobu Yamamoto? He's going to come over sooner. He's not as physically gifted. He's a little bit smaller at 5'10", 175. He's older at about 24 years old. I love this guy, though. He works quick. He changes his timing. He changes his mechanics a little bit in terms of, not mechanics, he changes kind of just the way that he moves so that he can throw the hitter's timing off. And another guy that pounds the strike zone. As we mentioned in the teaser to the World Baseball Classic, as we kind of ran through each of these prospects, Yamamoto's got the arsenal that's going to translate pretty quickly to the big league level. And I think that we kind of saw that in what we were presented by him in the WBC, between the fastball, the splitter, the curveball, and a cutter. That whole mix in there, pounds the strike zone with all of them, varies his looks. This guy's going to be a middle rotation starter, I think, and just get outs when he comes over.
Yeah, I think that he and Kodai Senga should be spoken about in a very similar breath. I think we're talking about Senga as a top flight 3 in the game already, and we haven't seen him throw a major league pitch. I think that is the way that Yoshinobu Yamamoto should be viewed as soon as he comes over as a top flight 3. I think he will command similar, if not more money to Kodai Senga. Senga signed 75. I don't know what his posting fee was. I would assume in the 10 to 15 range, like Seiya Suzuki's. Yeah. But Yamamoto, I mean, I would be okay giving him $75 million, knowing what he can do.
More.
Yeah, I think so too.
He's more decorated, more, and that matters. It does.
It does. He's probably a Tanaka type deal, 150.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that's crazy. And I'd feel safe about it too. Like, I don't know if he's going to make that frontline impact, but you're not going to regret it.
That's the price of a grade 3 now, man. Look at Bassett. Like, you're getting a younger Bassett by like 6 years.
Yeah, I think he probably gets 100, like something like that. Cool. And maybe by the time he comes, then it's 150 because of the way things have gone year to year.
Congratulations on generational wealth, Yoshi Yamamoto. But he appeared in 2 games, 1 start in pool play, and he piggybacked off Sasaki in the semi and was excellent off Sasaki in the semi against Japan. 7 1/3 innings in total, 4 hits, 2 earned, 12 punch outs, 2 walks. So another guy that pounds the zone, got swing and miss. The thing that jumped out most to me was, and we were talking about this, he's a timing fuck. Like, nobody can time him up. It's the Daisuke Matsuzaka thing, right? Remember when Daisuke was coming over his head and he was varying the pumps over his head before he came to the plate? This is even harder because Yamamoto, he'll take a big step back with his left foot and the righty will wait. He'll come at you a second later, 5 seconds later, 3 seconds later, and it's almost a slide step. He doesn't even lift the leg. It's awesome. So hard to time this guy up. I can't imagine being in the box against him. The only word that comes to mind is uncomfortable.
He had this absolute miserable at-bat for Alek Thomas where he was varying not only his looks, but his pitches. This was one specific at-bat that I wanted to pull up because it was so ridiculous. He did it to Trejo too. But Thomas, he ended up striking him out. Trejo, he walked him. He went curveball, cutter, sinker, cutter, curveball, cutter, splitter. And in doing so, also altered his looks 2 or 3 times with his timing. Like, that's just so messed up. Like, that's so unfair. And then to the point of just the competition, the only guys to get hits off of him in Team Mexico were Randy Arozarena, who got a hit off of everybody in this tournament. Alex Verdugo, who it was a kind of a weak hit. It was a weak hit. And then another weak hit from Joey Meneses. Like, that was it. It was 1 hard hit ball and 2 little Texas leaguers. Like,
and
against a pretty good line. Yeah.
It's 1 through 3 in the order.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this guy did. And then he just carved through Australia the first time around. It was almost unfair. So I'm really excited about Yamamoto. That's somebody that, if I was ever working for a team, I'd be comfortable, like James Click style, is saying, like, I'll put my career on this guy. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be a star, but like, I have no concern that he's going to be a solid big league arm.
Yeah, I think so as well, man. Now let's jump to Munetaka Morikami, who struggled. I'll give you the line on him for the entire WBC, but his story was written in the semi and the final. It was written across what I mean 4 innings, right? Because he homered in the front three of the final, and his story began in the ninth inning of the bottom of the ninth of the semi against Mexico. But 7 games for Murakami. He was 6 for 26, which is 231, but he had 3 doubles, that homer in the championship, 6 RBIs, 6 walks, but 13 punch outs and 26 or 26 at bats.
Yeah, the punch outs were surprising. I mean, he does strike out a decent amount for the NPB. I mean, that's something to watch, and it's going to be something that he's going to need to probably shore up a little bit more before he comes over. Just turned 23 years old. But we've talked about how he broke the single season home run record, in Japan. But yeah, the swing and miss was surprising because I'm watching this guy in BP, the way he controls his lower half, the way that he knows how to move coil over that back leg. He's doing all of these different little practice movements and feels before he gets in there, and he repeats the moves pretty well. It was kind of surprising. Sometimes he just looks rushed up there. So I am interested to see how he continues to adjust from that, because you go through the entire WBC, he struck out at least twice in a game, more than he struck out once in a game or less, right? Like he had more multi-home run strikeout games than one or less strikeout games. That's concerning, especially left on left. That said, the power, if he was a prospect right now, is 70 grade, and it's probably 80 future. And that's because of how mobile he is, how loose his hips are, and how well he uses that body. That walk-off that he went the other way with, that was what, 111?
111.
And then the home run was
hit off the base of the wall.
And then the home run was 115.
Dude, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is 70 to 80 power. Even if the hit tool is fringy, and I still have hope that he can get there with the hit tool, the power is too ridiculous. He will be an impactful bat. And what I really did like too is that we saw this guy overcome some really tough struggles. You mentioned the walk-off, man. 0 for 4 before getting into that walk-off position. He said in the post-game presser that he considered bunting. And his manager, Kuriyama, said, no, you're the home run record holder. You're not bunting. And he didn't bunt. So he ends up pulling the trigger. He fouls one off. And he said in the post-game presser that was all he needed. He felt better. And he drove a 111 mile an hour Oppo gapper. So this is a guy that overcame 0 for 4 with 3 Ks up to that, and comes up in the biggest stage there in the biggest spot, and eventually leads them, helps lead them to that World Baseball Classic final championship. So this, to me, that showed a lot of mental wherewithal. I thought that was really impressive, especially for a guy that did look a little bit lost at times. He still showed that he can produce and he can run into mistakes. And guess what? That's the name of the game for some of the best power hitters in Major League Baseball.
Yes. And how do you get over adversity? We talked about that on another pod on the Just Baseball Network, Show and Go with Taylor Davis. We talked about that in regards to Gunnar Henderson. We said, how do you get over the crappy times? Monotaka Morikami dealt with crappy times, maybe the crappiest times, on the biggest stage of his career, of his life so far. And how do you bounce back from that? On an even bigger stage, when you have well over half of Japan with their TV sets on, watching you in crunch time, in must-win scenarios, killing the ball. That is as well as somebody has overcome adversity on the brightest stage in quite some time. And the thing that jumped out most to me in regards to Murakami, this dude's built like a fire hydrant. Yeah. I didn't realize he was this cut, but he's a big dude, broad shoulders, huge lower half, like insane glutes and quads. I'm really excited to see what this guy does look like when he's 25, 27 years old, because at 23, he's one of the most physically imposing 23-year-olds you will find in the baseball world.
And so mobile, man, to be that strong and still have that fluidity. That's why I think he's going to be able to hedge the strikeout, right? The approach has always been good. Low chase rates in the NPB. Watching him before he would get, in the on deck circle, just like floating on that back leg, getting deep into that hip. Like you could tell that's what he wants to do. He uses his body really well. He is going to command a bag as he comes over. You want to get to Javier Assad real quick?
Yeah, Assad's the last one that we got a look at in the quarters, semis, and final. After that, we'll just fly through the other guys and their performance. But I do want to get to Assad. He threw 2 appearances, both came out of the bullpen. 5 2/3 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 6 strikeouts, and a walk. He was up to 97, I do believe, against the U.S. And then he shoved again against Puerto Rico in the quarters. Javier Assad looked great. And if he doesn't crack the Cubs opening day rotation, I don't think he will. I think that this guy would be an awesome reliever and be ready as the 6th starter.
Let me talk about the 2 appearances that he made out of the bullpen were against 2 of the best lineups in this tournament, right? Yeah. He goes 3 innings against the United States and 1 hit, no runs, no walks, 2 Ks. Then he comes out for 2 2/3 in a crazy environment at Lone Depot Park against Puerto Rico.
And a heavily Puerto Rican environment, 95% Puerto Ricans, I'm sure.
And it was intense. 2 2/3, 1 hit, no runs, 1 walk, 4 Ks. You talk about how he hits 97 in that outing. He punched out Martin Maldonado. He punched out, I'm looking through Christian Vasquez, Eddie Rosario. He punched out, this is insane. He was overmatching some of the better hitters in the game. And then also, really the only guy I think that got a hit off of him was Francisco Lindor, and MJ Melendez walked. So this is somebody that just rose to the occasion there and was not worried about anything. And if you look at the way he was locating, you look at the zone chart.
Yeah,
it is straight on the edges all the way around. He was spotting because he's always had to do that, right? Assad with the Cubs coming up through that system was always overlooked because he had no stuff, right? Just the stuff wasn't there. It was 6 pitches and pinpoint command, trying to just be perfect in each spot and get guys to get themselves out. His stuff is ticked up now, and he still has that command. That's how you get a solid big league pitcher.
Yeah, man, I'm all the way in on Javier Assad because we needed something positive to happen in the stuff department. Fastball 100%. Velo, that's as stuff as I needed it to be.
Yep. And the rest of it all kind of ticked up alongside. So I think Assad will be a rotation piece for them by June. I really do. And I think it's going to happen relatively quickly because we talked about him on the Just Baseball show recently. That rotation's a little shaky. Assad, I think, is extremely reliable and proved a lot.
Yeah. All right. I just want to kind of fly through the rest of these guys. I will let you know how they fared in the WBC across however many games sample. And if you have any takeaways on these guys, we can spend some more time on them. If it's, par for the course, hope they do well in whatever system, we can move right along. So we'll start with 2 Italians in Pool A and then a Panamanian. I think that's what it is for Panama, right?
Yes, Panamanian, of course.
Panamanian, of course. Dominic Fletcher, let's start with him. Better batting average than his brother David. How about it? 5 games with 7 for 19, which is a 368 clip across those 5 games. 2 doubles, a homer, 4 RBIs, 4 walks, and 3 Ks. Dominic Fletcher had a great WBC.
Man, this guy just hits, right? We talked about it in the preview. He just hits, and I think he's somebody that doesn't really get fazed by some pretty high-level competition, and he gives you good at-bats. I want to see more of this guy on the big stage. And also, it's worth noting, he was 3 for 4 against Japan.
In the
3
quarters.
for 4 with a homer against Japan. That's arguably the best pitching staff in this whole thing, right there with the DR. So it wasn't like he was just beating up on the Netherlands and beating up on some of these other teams. He was good against everybody. So for that reason, man, I still believe that he deserves big league looks early this year. And I hope he gets them. I think he had a little bit of a bloop single off of Shohei, if I'm not mistaken, and then had a couple other impressive at-bats as well. This is a guy that deserves more consistent ABs, and I hope he gets them at the big league level, but it's obviously a very good outfield over there in Arizona, so we'll see.
Do you know if that homer came against Darvish? Because Darvish came out of the bullpen in that quarter.
I am looking right now. He struck out the second. No, dude, he had 2 hits off of Shohei, and then the homer came off of, I believe it was Darvish, man.
Yeah. So I think that tells you all you got to know.
That's insane.
I do think that he should get an opportunity. I hope Kyle Lewis fares well, but I think he should be getting opportunities ahead of Kyle Lewis.
Homer was off of Darvish and 2 hits off of Shohei. Come
on, man.
Come on.
Come on. All right. Sal Frelick, 5 games. He was 7 for 23, which is a 304 clip, 3 doubles, 4 driven in. He walked. He struck out twice in 23 at bats, and he was 1 for 1 in the stolen base department. So Sal, I think, proved that he is Brewer ready. We'll see if it's Garrett Mitchell or Sal Frelick.
I think it's going to be Garrett. I think that's why they let him go to the WBC. I think they're just they want the extra year of control for Sal. Like, Sal's going to be a good big leaguer. So, that that's somebody that you want that extra year of control of. And I think Mitchell earned a look, but Sal did what Sal does, right? He had 1 offer in the tournament, I believe. And it was just against Japan in that same game where he had to face Shohei and Yu Darvish. That's okay. It's permissible to go 0 for 5 in that game. But he pretty much had a hit in every single other game, multi-hit games in multiple occasions against Panama and the Netherlands. He just hits, man. We know how good this guy is.
Yeah, 100%. Jose Ramos with Panama, 4 games. He was 5 for 16, so he hit just over 300 with a homer. He walked. He struck out 5 times, and he was 1 for 2 in the stolen base department. Jose Ramos was thrusted into a really difficult situation because he is very far off. He didn't look overmatched, which was really cool.
Yeah, and also a guy that played some decent teams relative to what he's faced, right? He faces the Netherlands, he faces Cuba, he faces Italy, and had hits in all of those games. So to your point, yeah, and then he goes to spring training and has been hitting there too. Ramos is definitely somebody that exceeded our expectations, right? I mean, we're looking at a big whiff guy in the lower minors, and he put together some good ABs. I'm interested to see if he can kind of keep that rolling.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like the level of competition that he saw in the WBC compared to lower minors pitching, because that Taiwan group was not great at all. It was Chinese Taipei, the Netherlands, Cuba, and Italy that joined Panama in there. So like, you're not necessarily seeing major league pitching.
No, he wasn't challenged, but I mean, it couldn't have been worse than the lower level pitching that he's seen. So I'm interested to see how he continues.
Yeah. All right. 2 guys in Group B that were not in Japan. We already talked about Sasaki, Yamamoto, and Murakami. Jung-Hoo Lee and Baeko Gung for Korea. Gung is the first baseman, powerful guy, packs a punch. He had a really, really good pool play. 4 games. He was 7 for 14 with 2 doubles, 2 RBIs, and 3 punch outs. If I'm not mistaken, he's just a big power guy, and he'll probably come over soon.
Yeah, and I think that's why he wanted to make it a point to have a nice tournament. It's always a little bit harder projecting the KBO guys, but this is one of those guys that is going to be a masher that comes over that I think it's all bat, but I think you can expect kind of like that G-Man Choi type, something like that, maybe could be a little bit better.
Yeah, one of the names that's in the free agent pool that might command some serious coin, maybe a $60, $70 million guy, is Jung-Hoo Lee from South Korea. 4 games was 6 for 14, which is a 430 clip. 2 doubles, 5 RBIs, 2 walks, just 1 strikeout and 14 at bats, and he stole a base on his only attempt. I think he passed the audition with flying colors for free agency next year.
Yeah, another guy that had a really solid game against Japan. Yeah, like, of course, he also played the Czech Republic and played China, and like those are games that you maybe got to take with a grain of salt a little bit, but he had a hit against Yu Darvish. He had a hit against Imanaga. He had a hit against Matsui. So this is somebody that also like flashed some impressive exit velos, popped to 107 because that power is not totally the part of his game. He's really toolsy and interesting, like around the board. So I thought this was another dude that really helped his case, even in a short little cameo as we brace for him to come over here. I think this is a really underrated, intriguing prospect relative to the Japanese guys.
For sure. Now it's all affiliated guys as we move stateside to Pool C, which was in Phoenix. Jordan Diaz of Colombia sucked. 4 games, 0 for 10, a walk, and 3 punch outs. I'm not worried about Diaz after this. There were some guys on that Israel team, even one of them, his teammate, Zach Geloff in the Oakland A's system. Like, Geloff and Diaz both go back to A's camp hitless, like 0 for in the WBC. And that's unfortunate. I'm not too worried about Diaz.
I thought that Diaz would be all right in this tournament. I thought Geloff would be overmatched. Obviously, Diaz is just hit. So it was surprising. But again, it's like 10 at bats, right? Look at what he did in AAA last year.
Right.
I'm not worried about it.
Hitter. Yeah.
Would have liked to seen a better tournament from him, but maybe he just wasn't ready. It wasn't like he was punching out left and right, though. I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, anybody can go over 10 in something like this, especially when you're seeing great pitching like he was, being on Colombia, being faced with, Canada, the US, and Mexico in that pool as well.
100%.
Mitch Bratt, the Canadian, listen, Mitch Bratt went viral in all the wrong ways. Thank God he got an out. He went a third of an inning, 3 hits, 6 earned, no strikeouts, and 3 walks. You can't take anything from that Bratt start.
Brad's going to be a good pitcher, man. I really believe it. I think he's a solid pitching prospect. What a ridiculous situation to have to be put in there. Doesn't impact anything in terms of how I feel about him, which is a really solid, mid-level prospect for the Rangers.
Yeah, probably back half, not even back half of the top 10, like probably a name to watch, right in the 11 to 15 range.
Yeah, I would say he's right there in the 13 to 15 range, which is a really solid pitching prospect. He's young and he's got 3 pitches that he throws for a strike. Like, that's not going to be enough to get Mike Trout, Mookie Betts, and Paul Goldschmidt out, though, unfortunately, and that's okay.
Yeah, that is okay right now. He's 19 years old. He just finished up a solid year in low A where I think he had a mid-2s.
Yeah.
So Owen Casey, another Canadian, as we fly through Canadians right now. Casey, 3 games, was 3 for 13 with a homer and 4 driven in. He walked and he struck out twice in 13 plate appearances. He looked really good.
He looked good, man. I know that the numbers maybe don't paint the complete picture. This is a guy that's only played in high A too, right? We're talking about a guy that just is 20 years old and has only played at high A. For him to hold his own in those games, the at-bats were really good. That was somebody that I made it a point to go watch. You know how I feel about Owen Casey. I feel like I'm definitely the high guy on him, but I thought he showed really well overall. It led me to be even more encouraged going into this year because I just wanted to see how he battled against some older competition, and I thought he did just that. He battled. He also crushed a home run and showed some of the power that he's got too. I'm really excited about Casey this year, man. I've been scooping up his cards. I'll tell you that.
Good. You are higher on Casey than most. I know you are also lower on Denzel Clark than most. And Denzel Clark really, really struggled. 3 games, was 0 for 8 with a walk and 5 strikeouts and 8 at-bats. He was 1 for 1 in the stolen base department. We know that the athleticism and the speed is there. Question has always been bat to ball, right? And he just didn't really show it at all.
Yeah, another guy that was kind of set up really, really tough here, right? I mean, we're talking about somebody that swung and missed a ton in the lower levels. He's a 68% zone contact guy. Like, he's got a lot to figure out. He's tooled to death. Like, he's got some of the most insane athleticism you're going to see on a baseball field. But we both said going into this, like, this guy's going to have a tough time, and he did, and that's okay. I'm sure he learned a lot just being there, which is always great.
Yeah, I'm willing to take my victory lap on Eduar Julian right now if you want me to.
You can cash in that ticket.
Julian, 4 games, was 7 for 13. So he slashed 538, 667, 1154 slug. Like, he had an 1821 OPS, 2 doubles, 2 homers, 2 RBIs, 5 walks, 5 punch outs. And he was 1 for 1 in the stolen base department. 7 hits, 5 walks, 2 homers, and an 1800 OPS over 4 games will play.
Oh yeah, that tends to play.
Yeah.
Dude, this guy was hitting at the top of the lineup for them, and like, he looked like a big leaguer. I think if you took somebody that didn't know much about baseball and just had them watch the game, they would probably assume that he was like a 5 or 6 year vet, just with the way he carried himself. Commanded the at bats. The game looked slow for him. He also showed the power. He showed the approach. He's ready, man. He's ready, which is crazy because he hasn't played much in the upper levels, or at least above AA, but guy that's hit at every stop. And then again, just looked like one of the most polished hitters on that team, which had big leaguers on it. Just kind of shows you he blended right in with the big leaguers.
I think you got to make some space for Julian if you're the Minnesota Twins.
And they got to make space in general. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle things. There's a lot of guys in that lineup, but Julian's a guy that I think could help them immensely, especially if somebody goes down. But honestly, I think he could be a better option than some of the guys they have starting. It should be really interesting.
Go trade some of those bats for another 3-starter. Go get like 8 3-starters.
8 threes. I'm in on that.
That'd be perfect. Otto Lopez with the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, with Team Canada, we got 2 more Canada guys, including Lopez. 4 games. Otto Lopez was 5 for 17 with a triple, a homer, drove in 6. He walked once and he punched out once in 17 at-bats. So Otto Lopez had a really good showing. I don't really know much about Otto Lopez. So is this like kind of par for the course with him? Does he have juice like this?
It's kind of, I think he's can sneak you, like sneaky pop some balls in and out sometimes where you're like, oh, well, there's Otto Lopez. But I think with him, like that was exactly what he does, which is grind at bats, put the ball in play, and surprise you with a home run every once in a while. Lopez, again, another guy that looked the part out there, though. He was a guy that looked comfortable with the game, didn't look. You could tell the difference. That was the number one thing I was looking at with these prospects. Is not as much the numbers, was how fast does the game look for them. It didn't look that fast for Lopez either.
Yeah, no, it didn't look fast at all for him. And then Bo Naylor is the only guy, and the game did look fast for him. Four
Yeah.
games, he was 2 for 14. He did hit a homer, drove in 3. He walked 3 times, but he struck out 7 times in 14 at bats. Naylor, I know you were watching how he was receiving. I know you tuned into that Canada Great Britain game intentionally. How do you feel about Naylor the defender and then Naylor the ready hitter?
I think he looked good defensively overall. I think that may have impacted the offense a little bit, right? He's catching some big league guys. I think he wanted to make sure that he held his own in that regard, and I thought he did, but he definitely just looked a little out of sorts with the bat. He's a guy that really made some major adjustments last year, and I think that he was still trying to get back into the swing of things, quite literally, getting those moves back down, getting his timing. He's a very rhythmic hitter, and he just seemed like he was out of rhythm the whole tournament and still had to focus on catching. It was a tough spot for a young guy to be in. I'm not worried about it, and I thought the defense, which was a big thing that I was looking at, was really solid.
How about Harry Ford? 4 games, was 4 for 13 with a double and 2 bombs, 4 driven in, 2 walks, 5 punch outs, and an elementary school in Great Britain saying that Harry Ford is their hero.
Absolutely awesome. He was not phased by some tough matchups. The approach, we knew it was good. We knew it was ahead of his years. He doesn't chase. But man, it's another thing to see a good approach against better stuff, right? Where it's harder to take pitches like that. He took pitches well. He showed us that he's got some pop, and the catching was great. There were some lapses with the blocking where you're like, oh, you should probably, get there a little bit differently or get there a little sooner, or like don't turn the glove over. Some small fundamental things here and there, but the receiving was better. The catch and throw looked better, which were 2 things I was really looking at. And I still thought the blocking, like there'd be one area where he didn't block great, but then there'd be another ball in the dirt and he'd adjust and block it better. This is a kid that's, I think, going to stick behind the dish and showed really well. I'm so excited for Harry Ford this year, and that got me even more excited. Even though it was just a few games, I think it really shows you what he's got between the ears and how physically talented he is too.
Did he spend the entire year in low A last year?
Yes, and I think that was just to really focus on the catching, not get him in fight or flight mode at the plate. Also.
So do you think starts in high may end in double?
Yes.
Okay,
100%.
got you. Tanaj Thomas hardly threw. He got 1 out. He allowed a hit and an earned run. Like, can't take anything away about Tanaj Thomas. Can't take anything away about Dominic Hamill either, who didn't even throw for Puerto Rico. I think he was slated to throw in a quarter against Mexico, but he didn't. Like, I don't know. That was really weird. Anthony Maldonado did throw an inning in the Marlins system for Puerto Rico. He threw an inning. It was a 1-2-3 inning with 2 punch outs. Maldonado is a major league reliever, I think, right now.
He's going to be in that Marlins bullpen early in this year, I think. He's not going to start because they don't have him on the 40-man yet, and I think they have some 40-man thing they have to figure out right now. There's no reason to just make it a bigger crunch, but the second they have some 40-man clarity or someone gets hurt, I think he's going to be one of the first guys to come up. That's one of the best sliders in the minor leagues.
It's incredible, and the fastball is insane too. It's that bully ball fastball that I talk about. Zach Geloff sucked. Again, we talked about him. 4 games, 0 for 13, struck out 7 times, walked once.
I mentioned it going in. When I saw him in the Arizona Fall League, I love the way he plays. I think he's a really well-rounded player. He has a professional approach, but there's just too much swing and miss there right now. And against higher level competition, he just seems to get blown up by fastballs a little bit. He's got some things he needs to figure out. And I think he's going to be a guy that probably spends the whole year in triple, which is fine. But, this was somebody that was kind of fast tracking, and some of the underlying metrics, zone contact, things like that, were kind of flagging maybe not fast tracking him. And I think we kind of saw why he needs a little bit more time in the minors.
Yeah, Colton Gordon got blown up at Astros prospect. Was it Venezuela or the DR?
Do you remember? I was excited about Colton Gordon too. I wanted to see how he would do.
The answer was terribly, but against like a far superior lineup. It was either Venezuela or the Dominican Republic, and we know how good those lineups
both of
were.
Which are permissible.
Yes, like he threw an inning, 4 hits,
It was
4
Puerto
earned, walked
Rico.
2.
It was Puerto Rico.
It was Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
That's still an excellent lineup. But an inning, 4 hits, 4 earned, 2 walks, no case.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. He retired Francisco Lindor and then
right.
and then retired Kike Hernandez and then walked MJ Melendez, single Emmanuel Rivera, double Javi Baez, double Eddie Rosario, walks Nelson Velasquez, and then retired Neftali Soto. And then gave up a hit to Martin Maldonado. So all big leaguers pretty much just ambushed him. But he almost got out of it 1, 2, 3. That's the crazy thing about baseball and why it sucks. But now I'm still kind of interested in Gordon. I think he's got some interesting stuff. Still a name worth watching in the Astros system.
100%. The Astros may need that starter depth. Again, it looks like McCullers may be, shelved right now, although Gordon is a bit farther off than some of those other guys. And it looks like Hunter Brown might have gotten tweaked too.
Yeah, he's dealing with something.
Damn it. Yeah. All right, 2 more guys on Israel. Spencer Horwitz, brutal. 4 games, 2 for 11, a run driven in, but no walks and 7 Ks and 11 at bats. He is a Blue Jays prospect that is probably like bouncing between triple and maybe the bench of the Blue Jays team. But Horwitz, he was outmatched this classic.
I like him offensively. I really do. I think he's better than that. I think the offensive woes were a bit contagious for Israel. Matt Mervis struggled too, which we'll get to. But one thing I can say unequivocally with Horwitz, he is not an outfielder. Goodness gracious. It was a disaster out there, which is a shame because I was hoping that would help him kind of solidify a spot on the bench. He can't play the outfield, so he's going to be at first base. That'll probably keep him in AAA for a longer part of the year. I still do believe in the bat being above average.
Yeah. And then Matt Mervis with the Cubs, 4 games, was 1 for 13, struck out 5 times and walked once. His timing was just off, right?
His timing was off. He was hitting cleanup for them. So it's a tough spot to be in. I talked to him before the game and he said he left spring training still feeling off and kind of had a feeling that it was going to be a little bit hard to get things going. He did have some lineouts and stuff like that, but he mentioned before the game, my timing's still just a little off. I don't totally feel there. And then I saw him swing through some fastballs he normally crushes. Happens. It's March. Not worried about Merv. I'll take the 160 game sample that we got last year between high A, double A, and triple A in the fall league over a handful of games in the death pool that was Miami.
Yeah, I think that's rational. I think that's a rational take from you.
Thank you.
Milkar Perez, 2 games, 1 for 4, a walk, 2 Ks. He is in the Mariners system. Nothing there.
Better than I thought.
Yeah, like, hey, a hit. Congrats.
Like 180 last year in low A or high A. Yeah. Like better than I thought. So good for Milkar.
Yeah, and then Carlos Rodriguez, you mentioned Nicaragua and the Brewers system. He started a game against Puerto Rico. 4 innings, 2 hits, 1 run, 3 punch outs, and a walk.
He was spectacular. He was spectacular. Absolutely spectacular. I'm excited to follow him because we talked about him in the beginning, as hey, don't sleep on this guy. He might be one of their better arms. And he was probably their best arm. His changeup is a plus pitch. I mean, going and looking at that video, he got Lindor to swing really badly a couple of times on some nasty changeups. The fastball has sneaky good shape to it in like the low 92, 93 range. And the slider is not a bad pitch. He's got a legit 3-pitch mix. Like, I think this guy could be a back end of the rotation starter. He's just 21 years old. Rodriguez is probably one of the more interesting rising prospects in that Brewers system.
Yeah, I can see that. All right, we're done, man. We just ran through everybody that we previewed on justbaseball.com as like the prospects to watch, and some fared exceptionally well, like in Eduar Julian.
Yep.
Some didn't.
Absolutely. That's how it goes. But it was really fun to be able to watch all of these guys in that WBC. And we're going to be right back onto our regular schedule moving forward now that we're kind of settled back in again and don't have craziness with the WBC. Excited to get some more top 10s, or I guess top 15s and farm system rundowns for you, and continue just kind of trucking away at this top 100 here. Before we know it, the season will be coming around, and we'll be talking about some of the teams to look out for in the minor leagues once we get those assignments as well. But very excited to continue to do that and expect couple episodes a week moving forward and going out throughout the season here. As always, thank you for listening. If you could take a second to subscribe to our YouTube and or leave a rating on the podcast side of things, we'd really appreciate it. We look forward to talking prospects with you early next week.